Stop doing scapular retraction exercises and stretching your pecs in hopes of improving your posture because you're probably missing a few key elements, and that's what we're going to get into in today's video. Hey guys, Greg Chaplin here, physical therapist and strength and conditioning specialist. In this video, we're going to talk about why scapular retraction exercises and pec stretches probably aren't going to improve your posture. We're going to talk about what we can do instead and why we fail to see results with these traditional methods. So without further ado, let's jump right in. So if you're watching this video and you have done scapular retraction exercises or pec stretches, you'll know that there is a temporary benefit that's often perceived, but this fails to deliver the long-term results. So if you're someone who's never done these exercises before, just to briefly cover this, a pec stretch is where you bring your arms back like this and the shoulders back, and the thought is that this opens up the front of the body and gets flexibility in through the pectoral muscles, which allows us to open up, and instead of the shoulders being rounded forward, it helps to start the shoulders to be able to come back. Then the retraction exercises are simply squeezing the shoulder blades together in the back, and the thought here is that these muscles are weak and lengthened and that they need to be contracted and strong to be able to be pulled back to maintain this open position on the front of the body. Now, if this paradigm of pulling the shoulders back and stretching the pecs was actually true, we'd see a couple of examples play out in life that we don't really see. So one thing that we'd see is that anyone that does these exercises would actually have better posture. And if you've ever done these, you've seen that yes, you can have a short-term improvement in posture, but oftentimes you'll just go back into that rounded position. And then on the flip side, if we had people who are training their chest muscles a lot and really tightening these up on a very regular basis, we would expect them to have very poor posture. But I'm sure everyone can find someone that they know who works out a lot in the gym, trains a lot of chest, and by standard thoughts would be tightening up their chest, but they seem to have somehow great posture, even though they're tightening their chest on a regular basis. So this is not about tight pecs and weak traps. This is actually about something totally different. So when we talk about this forward shoulder posture, where the shoulders start coming around like this, what we're usually dealing with first and foremost is actually that the front of the rib cage is compressed, and what we're going to see is usually a depressed or downwardly pulled sternum. So our sternum is going to be kind of caving down like this, and with that we'll see the ribs coming down as well. And so this is on one or both sides. Most typically you're going to see this on the right side. So what you'll see is if we look from this front view here, a lot of times people will have ribs on this right side that are pulled down towards the hip, and the ribs on this side would be moving into what would be considered internal rotation. And so that will give you the appearance of a lower right shoulder than left, as you can see here. And as these ribs move into internal rotation, the shape of the rib cage changes a little bit. And as the shape of that rib cage changes a little bit, the shoulder blade, which is just resting right on top of that rib cage, kind of goes along for the ride. And as you can see, now that shoulder blade and whole shoulder girdle have come forward into that internally rotated position, and oftentimes the arm also comes with it. So you'll see a lower shoulder here, but also a shoulder girdle that's positioned more forward, giving you that rounded shoulder appearance. Now, if we have the ribs in this position and we go to squeeze the shoulder blade back, this can temporarily give us the appearance of not as much of a rounded shoulder posture. But if we continue to have the ribs in this position and then we let that tension go in the upper back, the shoulder blade is just going to fall right back around and continue its normal path on ribs that are down, depressed, and internally rotated. So instead of thinking of getting the shoulder back first and foremost, let's think about what's actually underneath this. So when we think about this rib position, what in fact is driving this rib position? So we've been taught to think in that pulleys and levers type of way. So we think about bones and muscles and tendons a lot, but we don't think about what's actually inside the body. So inside the body, we have lungs here, which are right underneath the rib cage. We have a diaphragm here at the bottom of the rib cage. Then we have organs in here. So we have a liver here, we have a heart here, we have a stomach here. And then we have all sorts of guts coming down here through the intestines. And these actually have a lot of fluid elements to them, and they have a weight and a mass. So if we don't have anything going on in here, we would be considered dead. So it's really important that in a living person, we take this whole area into account, because this is actually a big part of our mass and how we move. We need to be able to move our fluids and our pressures through these two cavities, this abdominal and thoracic cavity, to be able to maintain position in space. So when it comes to the rib cage, what we're really concerned with is moving air. So if we do a big breath out, what we're going to find is that the ribs move down and together a little bit. Now, if we use a lot of force, or we have a lot of tension in the muscles, especially down the center abdominals for this example, we'll get a pull down of the sternum oftentimes as well. So when it comes to restoring the shoulder blade position, the thing that's actually going to help us to get this rib cage in the right position, believe it or not, is air. We have to fill this rib cage with air, and we need to be able to pressurize this entire system in a way that allows us to direct airflow up into these ribs. So instead of resting down like this in what would be considered an exhaled position, when we take our breath in, the ribs lift up, they come into external rotation. And so if we look again from the side here, if we start with ribs that are internally rotated and we have a shoulder blade that's resting around like this in that forward shoulder position, if we can drive some activity that will expand this upper segment of the right side and get these ribs to pop up into external rotation, what we'll find is that the shoulder blade naturally rests back. And instead of having to do exercises that squeeze this area together and create tension here, simply by driving expansion up, we can reshape the rib cage, and then we have an ability to hold this shoulder girdle without any effort, so it becomes effortless. So as we drive air up into this rib cage and these ribs come into external rotation, the shoulder blade then has a better rounded surface to sit on, and we can hold this shoulder girdle here effortlessly. And after all, when it comes to posture, really the definition of posture is being able to hold a position effortlessly. We're not going to be squeezing the shoulder blades back and holding them there all day. That is actually not productive at all, and it's going to limit movement more than it's going to promote movement. Now, when it comes to improving expansion in this area, there's a couple of things that we can do to actually drive some airflow up into this side. Now, this is just one of the many ways that we can reverse some of these relationships that happen in regards to the rib cage and the pelvis and improve some of that shoulder blade positioning. And the thing I love about this position is that when we prop up on elbows like this and we get the rib cage to lift in this position, that muscle that we talked about earlier that goes from here on the sternum all the way down to the pubic bone, that has to lengthen out a bit. Now, when we're in this position, we can actually push up with the elbows so that the rib cage moves further up between the shoulder blades. That's actually going to open up that space that we're often cued to squeeze, which is pretty nice because it actually helps expand the back of the rib cage as well as the front of the rib cage. And then because of the influence of gravity in this position, we actually have the front of the rib cage, which is going to expand more towards the ground, because the lower part of the lungs, which in this case in relation to the ground and with gravity is going to be the front of the lungs, is actually going to expand a little bit more. So we have a lot of things going on here. We have that lengthening in that superficial muscle here that often gets that rib cage to pull down in the first place. Then we get expansion on the back side of the body, while gravity is helping us to get expansion on the front side of the body. Now, a similar position would be something like this, which is actually an inverted activity. So we can see the butt is higher than the rib cage here, and that takes advantage of that gravitational influence that we talked about a second ago. So now the upper body is lower than the lower body, so we get even more expansion up towards the top of the rib cage, and because we're in this all fours kind of position, we're going to get expansion on the front side here. We're also going to be able to push that rib cage up, so if we have restriction here at the lower level of the rib cage, we can expand this while we're also expanding the front as well. The other bang for the buck that we get in this position as well as that first position is that the head has to be held upright here. So if we have tightness in the front of the neck that pulls the neck down and gives us that forward head as well, we can counter that by working here on the back side of the neck and upper back, using some of those deeper intrinsic muscles of the back to support the neck and the head. So we've talked through why scapular retraction exercises and pectoral stretches might not be a solution, and we've talked about what some alternative strategies and some rationales are to improve some of the positions that are going to help improve posture. But the question remaining is, how do we get these to stick? And when it comes to getting these results to stick, what we have to do is we have to take the strategies that we're learning to use. So expanding that upper rib cage, repositioning the rib cage, those sorts of things. And then we need to bring them into a context where we're actually challenged in our ability to maintain them. So usually this is going to be occurring under load or during our daily activities. And this is something that I get into inside of my movement coaching program, working one-on-one with people to improve their movement. So not only do we go through these restorative techniques to regain the ability to expand areas that are compressed and to reposition our body, but then we need to take those skills and integrate them into activities that are more challenging so that these results can actually stick. So if that's something that you're interested in, go down below into the description and you can go to my website and book on a free call with me to talk through what your movement goals are and to see if you're a good fit. So there you have it, guys. We don't need to squeeze the shoulder blades back or to stretch the pecs in order to improve that forward shoulder posture. We instead need to reposition and then learn to expand compressed areas of the rib cage. We then take those skills, transition them into the gym. That's how we get them to stick. So if you like this video, go ahead and like it. If you have any questions, leave them below in the comments. If you have a name for my new skeleton, leave that down below in the comments as well. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you'll know when I upload a new video. And until next time, thanks a lot for watching. Peace.